So, Sheena, do we have any questions? Oh, great. Let's say hello.
I think we've answered the questions. I'm not sure who this number is, but 508, you are on the air. Who do we have?
Oh, hello?
Hi.
Hi, welcome.
Hi.
You're loud and clear. Give us the name. Where are you calling from?
I'm Colleen. We spoke before in the past. I've had emailed with Jeannie a few times.
Right.
I don't know if you remember.
And your name is?
Colleen. I'm sorry. I thought I said.
Okay, Colleen. Delight to say hello. What's on your mind today? How can we support you?
Okay. Well, basically, I've been working on, doing the worksheets and things have been working out. I went back and forth with Jeannie on a couple that I wasn't doing so well with, and she helped me a lot.
Right.
What I'm thinking about today is that I actually just moved unexpectedly, and it's been a very positive move, and, that's all great. I guess what I'm thinking about is, I've heard you say in many, many talks that location, changing location isn't necessarily going to change the things that are upsetting you because they come from inside me. So it's kind of like one of these situations where I had this good opportunity to move out of where I was, which seemed to be upsetting. And now like I said, I was kind of working with Jeannie. She gave me some really good advice that it helped me to become in a place of love. When I was arguing, it was my father that was, I was having trouble with. And like one of the things I actually wrote down that she said, you do not know that what your mind tells you is true about him, but it is absolutely true about you. Things like this. And so I found myself in a position where I was in a good place, and he was kind of saying and doing things that I still were kind of like, I wasn't mad and I wasn't upset and in fear, but it was kind of just like, this is not ideal for me. And I kind of almost heard my own voice in my head going, you have a healthier choice. Like, why have not you taken it, So I did, and I went. And now I'm in a different place, and it's actually a lot better. And the things around me seem a lot better, and I feel lighter, and I feel really good.
Good.
But
triggers.
Yes. However, the stuff is mine. You know what I'm saying? And I'm really just trying not to fall into the situation where I believe that it's all gone. And I guess I was even just doing a worksheet about it this morning, saying, I have anxiety. Now that I moved, everything seems better. I know that those feelings of upset I had recently are still inside me. I was even feeling hesitant. Jeannie had emailed me recently and just kind of checking in to see if I'd called in, and I had not because I've been busy and moving and things and allowing everything else to get in the way of doing the work, basically, is the truth. And then I guess I just don't want to lose sight of that. I want this new situation, which seems better, to actually be better. I don't want to continue to, to have these same things react. And I guess I was just looking for some support in that.
Okay. Well, as you were unfolding or talking about the interaction with your dad, and the words used, I think, were upset, fear. I'm not sure what the other ones, but there were three things that you said you were not. And Shakespeare gave us a really valuable tool back hundreds of years ago when he wrote, "My words fly up, my thoughts remain below." So if I pay attention to my words will always tell me what's going on in my own unconscious, even though I don't know it. And so when you say, with the interaction with Dad, I wasn't upset, I wasn't in fear, my offering would be, I'd be listening to those words if I were you and recognizing, okay, so there's still some upset and there's still some fear. I wouldn't be using those words if it weren't there. I use an example of, let's say we're supposed to meet next week in Knoxville. And I call you and say, and I'm not going to China next week. Why would I say I'm not going to China unless there was some thought about going to China? And so if I pay attention to my words, it sounds like you've moved to an environment where there aren't as many immediate triggers, and that's awesome. Congratulations. Sometimes a geographic cure can give you time to catch your breath. And it can be helpful, especially if it's a negative environment. Yeah. And listening to your words, and there was a third word that's used, I'm not sure what it was, but
I think it might have been
fear,
anger, but I'm not sure.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think that was it. So what I'd do in my new environment is I'd start doing some worksheets around anger, around fear, and upset. And continue to do the work of cleaning those things up so that I don't have to energetically trigger things in my environment to bring them forward. I'll give you an example. I was talking with someone yesterday that we did a 3-day personal intensive with. And this woman was a lawyer, and she was having problems with a client, and the client was suing her for a significant amount of money, and her bar association was coming after her. And she came into that, the big issue in her face when she came into that 3-day was that issue. And I just talked to her yesterday, and she was sharing with me that this was just a couple of weeks ago, that literally while she was on the table doing the forgiveness work that she was doing, a shift occurred, and not only was the bar association not coming after her anymore, but the bar association had turned the case around and put the liability for it on the person who was suing her, and that they were going to pick up the liability and go after this person instead of her having to do it. And my offering is that, probably the greatest atrocity that has been done to us as human beings and that we've bought into is that we have had hidden from us the fact that we are by nature creators. You and I are creative beings. And one of the surest ways to create something is to hide it in the one place where it's going to impact my life, and that is inside of me. So if I notice when I'm talking about a situation, well, I'm not angry, I'm not afraid, then what my unconscious is telling me is below the surface, below conscious awareness, there's some anger and fear, some upset. And so instead of waiting till those energies bring results, somebody to do the behavior that resonates on a deeper level, my anger, because when I hold anger, when I hold fear, I literally am setting up an energy field that through resonance is going to tend to draw somebody in to do those things that I have anger and fear. My mind tells me my anger and fear is about. And so kind of preempt the world and just, watching my words, I see okay, I'm going to do some worksheets around anger. Well, gee, what would those worksheets look like? Well, Dad was a big trigger. Yeah, Dad was a big trigger for me. So I might, even though I'm not in Dad's presence now, I might go ahead and do a worksheet on Dad. And then you can look at a general category. It might be, well, gee, is this worksheet on anger that ties in with Dad? Dad knows how to bring up my anger. And maybe I say I'm angry with him, but the truth is you've never been angry with your dad. But if there's anger in you and Dad's around and he triggers your anger, you can certainly put that anger into your brain's image of him.
I would feel like I would love him more now. I could love him more than now that I'm away from him, which is horrible. But that's how I felt. I was like, I don't want to feel this way about him. God forbid if anything should happen. I just don't want our last conversation to be yelling and anger.
Right. So there's a good worksheet. So what I don't want. And notice that when I focus on something, if you go back to Yeshua 2,000 years ago, he says, let thine eye be single, and thy body will be filled with light. Now we listen to that and we go, what the heck does that mean? And what he's saying there is, as energetic beings, if we are totally focused on one frequency to the exclusion of all others, we're going to bring that about in the world of what we call matter. And if you talk to the physicists today, they'll tell us that matter is light energy condensed or solidified. So if I recognize that that's something that's been in me, then I might go ahead and, so I might do worksheets around Dad. I might do worksheets around, maybe it's Dad as an authority figure. So I might do some worksheets on authority figures. Maybe it's Dad just as a male, men, those men. And so I start doing worksheets rather than hanging out in the environment where you're not as triggered and having to draw somebody in to bring those things up, recognizing that they're there just by listening to your own speech, work through them, and you don't have to manifest me. You don't have to draw them into your life again. And you can truly be finished with those things.
Oh, that would be amazing. Okay.
So that would be my offering. I'd start doing worksheets on, and what is in that role where Dad can trigger anger? Is it the role of him? Is it just because he's a man? Is it because he's your father? Is it because of, old childhood issues?
There's a few things. It's kind of, so he ran the business that we all worked, me and my brother, my sister, and the rest of my cousins worked for years. So he was my boss and my father for a long time. He's retired now, and the family is running the business still. But then I was living with him, so there was that sort of an authority thing. But then he also kind of had needed help with health things, but he wants to be independent, and we're having that struggle because he doesn't want to listen to doctors. And it's kind of turns into a thing, and it's hard because I intellectually understand the work I'm trying to do here, and that it's not him that's at fault for my feelings, but then I have like family members that will kind of almost confirm for me that he is acting a certain way, that he's making them feel this, you know what I mean? And it almost makes me fall back into that.
Okay. Sure. It's easy to fall into. It's kind of like the first time you blow up a balloon, it can take a lot of effort to get that balloon to blow up. But once it's blown up, it blows up easier the next time. And so
yes, and
my offering would be like, for instance,
sorry.
Well, from what you just said, if I were you, and I were listening to my own speech, as what you just said, like one of the worksheets I'd be doing would be on wanting Dad to be healthy and wanting Dad to listen to medical professionals, wanting Dad to change his habits. So they're the things that sound like they probably tie in with that frustration, and maybe the frustration gets intensified enough that it becomes anger. And my offering would be that when frustration or anger moves in any of us, it doesn't mean we don't love someone, because the truth is we can't love someone. But what it does is it robs us of those energetic patterns, rob us of our ability to be love in the presence of that person that we want to care for, cherish, and honor. And so if I have unresolved frustration or anger, and my mind tells me it's about Dad not listening to the doctors, then I'd be doing some worksheets where I cancel my need for Dad to listen to the doctors, and I'm willing to allow Dad to do what he needs to do. And if he makes mistakes, then I'll be there to support him. And so as it's kind of like looking ahead by looking at the past and knowing yourself what's likely to come up, then you can preempt that and do the forgiveness work before it even happens, recognizing and knowing yourself, clean those energetic patterns up, and then, should Dad not listen to the doctors, and as a result, he gets himself into more health challenges. Instead of being frustrated about it, you can simply stand there as the space of active love with a hand out, with your heart open, and say, Dad, how can I support you? What do you want to do about this? Instead of, oh, if only you'd listened.
Yeah, that's exactly, unfortunately. And every time I respond like that, I feel awful afterward. I know it's
Right.
not helpful.
Right. So there's your worksheet. That awful.
Well,
That awful.
what
That's
you
what
said
you want to
about
free
the men
yourself
in
from.
general thing, too, is that was a lot of me and Jeannie's correspondence as well. Is he kind of has this whole thing, because I haven't been in a relationship in a long time for a lot of reasons, and he's kind of like, oh, you don't have a boyfriend. It triggers something to me that's insecure about that very thing, which, because simply I just think I have a lot of work to do. I don't know. And, yeah, that's definitely a factor.
Well, it can be
well.
wisdom. Yeah, it can be wisdom to choose. Let's say if I recognize that I have a lot of issues to work through in terms of relationships, say, I'm not in a relationship right now. I'm not going to rush right out to get one. I'm going to just do the work that I know I need to do around relationships so that if and when it's time for a new relationship to open, I can go into that relationship clean and clear of my past relationship dynamics, rather than, okay, well, I'm not in a relationship, so I'll forget about doing any work on myself around my relationship issues, and then wait until 6 months or a year or 2 years or 5 years later, somebody comes along and that whole file opens up again. Now I'm right back in the same old dynamics. I recognize, I've got some issues in relationships to work through, so I'm going to do that work before stepping into a relationship and move forward within myself. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. It does. I think you're right about the idea that, I'm still going to see him 2-3 times a week in short time periods, which I think is great. And I just think it was a lot of triggers at once that it was making it difficult to do the work.
More than you're ready to deal with at one time. Yeah, that makes,
a
makes sense.
A little bit. As I had a lot anyway, just with my own personal stuff, I don't know, we spoke about on another conversation, but I remember. It just was adding. Yeah, so at least here it's sort of quiet on the around me front. I can focus on me, but I can still interact with him, and those things come up. I can deal with them too. But,
well, there's an old saying that says, absence makes the heart grow fonder. And that really isn't true. Absence means... No, it isn't true at all. What it means is, now that I'm away from the person who resonates my issues with them, those issues energetically start to kind of die away. It's like my mind turns the volume down, and it seems like they're not there anymore. But just move back in with them and see how long it takes.
Yeah.
So it isn't that the heart gets fonder, it's that the hostility and fear-based things that people resonate in us, if we're not around something that stimulates them, they tend to just get quieter and quieter in the mind, and we can pretend they're gone. Of course, again, they get in your face, and you know they're not gone in a big hurry. But while you're in that place of absence, actually do the work to make your heart grow fonder. That is, recognizing yourself, what kind of energetic patterns you have around Dad, around men, clean them up. Really dig in and start to do the forgiveness work in that arena. And then when you do get closer with Dad, your heart truly can be fonder. You truly can be more of a space of love because you've owned and you've cleaned up the issues you have. And by doing that around Dad, that will tend to open the space, if you do choose to open to relationship, where you don't have to do the same old stuff again. You've done the work, and you can create a cleaner, clearer relationship. My offering, my take is that the primary purpose of relationship is to kick us right square in the limitation, to show us what we're holding on to, with which we're destroying ourselves. Now, sadly, most people, when they get kicked in the limitation in a relationship, the pain that resonates in them, they don't believe it's theirs. They're feeling it, but they don't believe it's theirs. They think it's that other person's pain. You made me sad. You made me afraid. You hurt me. rather than moving into the arena of, you know what you just said brought a lot of sadness up for me. I realize when I hear you say things like that, man, that resonates a lot of hurt in me. I think I'll go to work and forgive as to my hurt and my sadness. Now that I'm free of it, I don't have to ever play it out again in a relationship. But if I don't work through it, sooner or later, it's going to come up. My take is the reason why relationships, and it's not even just relationship, it's life in general, the purpose is to kick us in the limitation is, life is about life. Life abhors death. Life doesn't want you destroyed, suffering, or dead. And so life is set up. It's like the whole dynamic of life is set up that life will always come in and resonate the lowest, darkest energy that you hold, not for any other reason than to inform you that it's there and give you the opportunity to work through it. Now, if we live the way the culture's taught us to live, if, I get into a relationship and somebody resonates that dark place in me, I'm all of a sudden in a conversation about how they make all this darkness happen in me. And I want to, part of the work is to be able to shift my conversation and be able to say, what you just said, man, it showed me some darkness that I thought I'd gotten rid of a long time ago that I didn't know was still there. And I'm ready to move through it. Would you support me in it? There's another tool that we teach called responsibility communication. You might even, aside from the worksheet process, you might step into, there's a worksheet on the website for doing responsibility communication, a set of rules for doing that. You might want to download that worksheet and maybe do some written responsibility communication with that. And as you do,
I haven't explored that yet. That sounds great.
It's another whole arena of work that is just so powerful that cleans up so much of the mind. And responsibility, most of the world, the way that we're trained, you've heard me say it before, by the age of 4, most of us are already very devout, card-carrying members of the one world universal religion of blame. Tough religion to break, quit.
Yes.
And the way that we quit is when we have a conflict with someone, i.e. Dad, instead of walking away muttering under my breath about Dad, I walk away having a conversation to myself about myself. Gee, what was that anger all about? Why was I so frustrated? What's the thought sort of behind that? What do I need to work through? Now, most of the culture has been taught to live in what we call projection communication. And projection communication is communication where I try to convince you that you're the cause of what's moving inside of me. Again, you made me sad, you made me mad, you made me afraid. The opposite, responsibility communication, moves in the direction of, instead of describing the reality in my mind as though it's your fault that I'm experiencing it, I describe the reality in my mind knowing that I'm responsible for this. So I walk away from that conflict going, I had so much frustration. I really, instead of blaming him or somebody else for my frustration, I really need to start to do some forgiveness work around frustration and get done with it. Like, how much of my life has been about frustration? It's time to be done with it. And so when I use responsibility communication, which in essence is I use words to describe the perceptions, the constructs of my mind, as though I'm responsible for them, rather than I use words to describe the constructs of my mind as though somebody else is responsible for them. So that can be a powerful practice that opens just an awesome space. And oftentimes doing it in writing can be very powerful. It will show you worksheets that you need to do. And it can also be helpful to present it to someone, to send it to someone. One of the principles that I always talk about when I talk about the responsibility communication tool is that if you go out into the world and you find, let's say, poison ivy, you'll always find that where that poison plant is, in close proximity to the poison ivy, is the antidote to poison ivy. The person who can resonate the part of me that's in pain, now if I'm all about blaming them, chances are things aren't going to go very far. But if I'm willing to take responsibility and own what's moving in me, then that person's usually the one that has the antidote to my pain and can support me in it. As long as I'm pointing the finger at them and telling them what's wrong with them, of course, they're not going to serve up the antidote. But when I start in a core piece in the responsibility communication is, when we had that conversation yesterday, that brought so much rage up in me, and I've had rage on and off through my life, and I realized I really need to work through this. And do you have any idea? Do you have any thoughts on what might support me in dealing with this rage? And you may find that Dad says, sweetheart, sounds like my life story. I know all about that rage. As a young man, I had more of that than I wanted to deal with, and I recognize that, in raising you kids, I did more of that than I ever should have. And here's one of the things I found, and you may just find him having found a solution that he hands to you out of the space of care and concern for you that gives you the opportunity to go, oh, so that's it. All right, I can do that. It just changes the whole dynamic of the game.
Yeah, because I'm blaming him, so I'm not able to see that if it's there.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
quitting that one world universal religion of blame is a major job to quit that religion, because the mind has been trained. I mean, our whole culture, if you look at most of the language of the culture, it's all about how you made me. I know when I was writing my book, Why Is This Happening to Me Again?, one of the things that I did is, in working with the first century Aramaic forgiveness, I went and I sat, I don't remember if it was Barnes & Noble, but one of the big bookstores for several days, and I just went through their bookshelves and found every book I could on forgiveness. Ministers, rabbis, priests, psychologists, psychiatrists, and what I found was literally every book, sooner or later, they'd come up with, the therapist, whatever their role is, whether, again, or they were a priest or psychiatrist or whatever, sooner or later with the person they're working with, they'd always have the phrase, they'd always say, and how did that make you feel? You will never find us in this work asking you how something made you feel, because nothing can make you feel anything. The only thing that can make you feel something is the fact that you have a matching thought to that feeling inside yourself. And that, to me, was one of the major features of this work compared to literally everything that I looked at. I mean, the whole culture is about this, something out there is the cause of what's moving in me, and that leads us to denial. That leads us to hiding a part of our own minds from ourselves, and that's the part of our minds that comes back and bites us in the butt. When I communicate responsibly about it, I can break it down, be free of it, and go, oh, okay, now I'm done with that. So holding the space for you.
Thank you. I thank you very much. This has been really helpful, and I'm gonna check those sheets out. I have not seen that on the site yet, so I'm looking forward to exploring this, because you just gave me exactly what I called for. So thank you.
Well, there's a sheet called Communication Rules.
Okay.
In the worksheet sections. That's the one on responsibility communication. And we'll be holding the space for you, extending love in your direction and in the direction of Dad, knowing that with your awareness and, facing what I like to call the good old family feeling, the family dynamics that have been going on in many cases for generations and generations and generations, and changing, that's a major piece of work to do. It's so major. If you go back and you listen to the story of, there's an ancient story in the Old Testament that talks about this group of people who were actually quite bright people, and as a community, we're told in that book that they got lost in a desert. And we're told that they spent 40 years in that hot, sandy place. And if you check it out, the area that they supposedly were lost in was about 35 square miles. And we're told that they spent 40 years wandering in this 35 square mile area, lost. Now, if you apply just a little bit of thinking, that's a pretty ridiculous story if you try to take it literally. But when you realize that what they were talking about is that word desert is a code word for the unconscious. And most people, before they start to scratch their head and go, gee, you know, I've been through this 87 different times with 42 different people. Maybe this is about me. Maybe this is mine. That person just left the desert, left functioning unconsciously. They left the world of blame. Now, if you read through that whole story in those ancient scriptures, again, it's not about a hot, sandy place. It's about working through our own unconsciousness. And you'll hear what it took to get out of the desert to go into what they called the promised land. What did that group have to do to get out of the desert? They said the old generation had to die off. Now, that word generation, Janari, does not mean that everybody in old physical bodies had to physically die. The root of the word Janari is cause. All of the causes held in the mind from the generations had to be removed to get out of the place where we create our lives unconsciously. And the promised land is nothing more. It's not about a place of milk and honey and coconuts and palm trees. The promised land is simply the place where we recognize ourselves as conscious creators. And we only engage in the energies that really serve our lives and that we really want to create from. So it's a major turnaround that has to happen, and that's basically what this whole body of work is about, is overcoming the generational patterns and functioning from choice and the presence of love, of ourselves as love, as human beings, rather than functioning from the false power person-based self, the hostility and fear and blame games of the generations. Getting free of that. Glad you're on the track for doing it and joining us in doing it, and know that we're here to support you every step of the way.
Thank you.
Awesome. Delighted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye, guys.
All right. Well, Miss Jeannie, do we have anybody else in the phone queue? All right.
But we also had a question in Podbean, and I apologize. I was trying to move to another screen, and I disconnected Podbean, so I cut her off. So I'm not sure if she's back on yet or not. But she asked she said, I was wondering if Michael could go into how to start the day. And she mentioned the name Rukmah, and I asked her if that was Rukmah in Cuba, and she said no. She said it was on a worksheet, so I think she's referring to Rukha.
Right, Rukha de Kucha. Okay.
Yeah, and starting the day with Rukha.
Okay. So is she back on? Can we tell to go on with that conversation?
She is not back on. Oh, there she comes. So I apologize. Jamuna, I had accidentally hit the wrong button and disconnected Podbean. So I'm not sure if Rukha is who you were referring to, because that is in the worksheet.
So Jamuna, she was just explaining to me your question about starting the day. And was that question, she wasn't clear, was that question about starting the day with Rukha or Rukha de Kucha? Can you help us clarify that?
I did mention before I cut Podbean off, in the worksheet, you know, it asks you to cancel first your goal, because you have free will, you can hang on to it as long as you want to. But then you ask Rukha to assist you with it.
Right.
She hasn't answered yet. So, but you,
okay.
The day with Rukha.
Okay. So, in the ancient Aramaic, when
she's actually
they talk about
in queue.
In the phone queue? Well, then let's do it, and then we can talk directly. That'd be much better.
Awesome. So I think is this Jamuna?
An 808 number, probably.
Hi.
Hey there, young lady. Welcome.
Hi. Yes. So my question was about, starting the day, like intentions. Like I know, like in ACIM, they talk about the rules for decision, and I know that you've mentioned before about somewhere I saw about like starting off with Rukmah or Rukha Bhikusha, and you know, having a like, yeah, staying in the presence of love. And I was wondering if you could go into that further.
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting how we tend to be driven in this culture. In fact, there was a very popular book back a few years ago called The Purpose-Driven Life. And I can remember hearing about that with the knowledge of the Aramaic, and it was like, oh my God, no, I'm not a cow. I don't need to be driven. Thank you. I'd rather be inspired. And inspired, it's interesting to note, do with the breath. And if you go back to the original creation story in the Western scriptures, we're told that God sent out his spirit, that's the word that's used by the Greek, but that's not what it says at all in Aramaic. What it says is the Creator sent out its breath. And so for me personally, the practice that I'm in, rather than I have a list of 1,000 things that I set up last night that I need to do, and I jump out of bed and I'm going to rush off and do those things, is I haven't accepted anything on my list that I, quote unquote, intend to do yet. I haven't set any of that in place yet. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to take some time and I'm going to breathe. I'm going to connect to Rukha Dukucha, which are the words that were used in the ancient Aramaic for the Creator sending out its breath. And in Aramaic, those words translate as a feminine elemental force in us that does two things. One, undoes the effects of our errors, and two, teaches us the truth. So my starting point, and actually not just starting point in the morning, but generally speaking, last thing at night, I'll go in, you've done the still point breathing workshop. I'll start as I'm ready to sleep, once I've closed everything down, I'll step into just a gentle connection with the whole breath and just allow the breath to move through my own physiology, to let things soften, to let tensions go and melt into sleep. I ask for guidance. If there's something that I'm ready to learn, something that I need to know, please show me. Oftentimes, Jeannie, we have a TV in our room. I know a lot of people say you're not supposed to do that, but last thing at night, we'll usually watch a documentary or movie, and oftentimes we'll watch something that's sometimes quite violent. And as we're watching it, especially with it getting later in the evening, one of the things we'll often turn to each other and say, wow, that really resonates some stuff. Let's join in asking Rukha to move that through us. And then after the TV's off, asking Rukha, asking the breath to move, and anything that's been resonated by that TV show or that movie, for me to be freed of it. There was a time in my life when I would not go to a violent movie. It was like, and I started to do energy work and it's like, why would I put that vibration in my field? And actually, this goes back, I don't even remember what year this movie came out. Probably 25 years ago. The movie was called The Island. And I had heard it was a violent movie, and I had guidance inside to go and see this movie. And I said, no, I'm not going to go see that movie. And the guidance was it was like, go to that movie. No, go to that movie. Okay. The opening scene in the movie, as I remember it, is there's a boat out in the Caribbean, and somebody climbs up on the back of the boat and graphically hacks off somebody else's leg. And I can remember so distinctly and saying to myself, what the hell am I watching this for? And what came back was, Michael, you have a belief in a world of violence. Now, you can pretend that belief isn't in you and go on in the world never facing it, never dealing with it, and you'll have to create that violence in your world. Or you can sit here and you can breathe and you can work through what this brings up in you. So since then, there was a time period, I don't have any recall now of how long, but it was a significant time period. I would not go to a violent movie. Now, we do it all the time and use it as a catalyst to, okay, if there's something in me that causes me to lose my connection to love here, I'm going to breathe and I'm going to move through it. And so last thing at night, we'll say to each other, join in asking Rukha to move that. And then in the morning, again, rather than rushing off to get the to-do list done, I'll spend anywhere from half an hour to 45 minutes. Sometimes, this morning it was short. I had an appointment, so it was only about 30 minutes. But just being in that quiet place with Rukha, with the breath, and asking whatever is in me that needs to be moved to move, paying attention to my physiology, where are the tension points, taking the breath to those tension points, letting them soften and uncover whatever it is that I've been hiding from myself. My take is that you and I as human beings are not designed to have an unconscious mind. And yet, psychologists tell us 80, 90, 95, sometimes they'll say as much as 98% of our so-called thinking is unconscious. And I think the reason for that is because people don't pay attention to Rukha. People don't breathe. They hold their breath. And whatever they hold their breath around builds up unconscious energy. And so for me, the starting point each morning is connecting to love, breathing into that love, and asking to be shown what do I need to learn? What's ready to move in me today? So that's my take. Does that fit? Make sense?
Thank you. Yes, it makes perfect sense.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
And deserving.
Thank you so much.
Honored and delighted.
Okay.
Any other thoughts for you? I say honored and delighted. Any other thoughts for you?
No, that's about it. I just wanted your take on it. I kind of was like, start with the breath and be shown. That's what I needed to hear, what's inside of me,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's the key. Yeah, what we hold our breath in the presence of, we create an unconscious dynamic about, and we acquire and hold on to a past. What we're willing to breathe through frees us from the past.
Thank you so much.
It's so imminent. In the religions, they talk about the Holy Spirit like it's some kind of mystical, disembodied spirit, something or other. It's just the breath. It's just moving the breath and moves everything.
Yeah, that's it.
So breathing with you. All right.
Thank you so much. Aloha.
All right, honored. Aloha. Have a blessed one. Miss Jeannie?
He had his hand up and he put it down, but I'm going to turn on his microphone. Hello, Michael. Welcome.
Hey, Michael. How are you, sir? How are things in Texas? Tejas. And if you're trying to speak to us, we're not hearing you, Michael. Is your mute button on, maybe? Or maybe his hand was down because he had to move away from his phone. Are you mute challenged, Michael?
Maybe he did have to move away.
Yeah, probably.
Okay, so any other
So if you're out there in
questions?
listener land, yeah. Our call-in number is 563-999-3581. If you call that number, you'll be listening to the show directly, then push 1 and we'll have a conversation. So what's exciting in your world? What's happening in your life? How can we support you? Any
Michael
questions,
put his hand
thoughts,
back up.
answers? Oh, great. Let's say hello.
Welcome.
Hey, Michael, we've got you. Your mic is open.
Michael, okay. Can you hear me?
There you are. You are now loud and clear.
I had to go away
Officially.
for a bit, and
Okay, figured that.
someone at the door. I'm back, and yeah, it's been a while. I forgot actually that I came in early in the show and actually forgot to push 1. If you can believe that, it's just yeah. So here we are. Hi, Jeannie.
Well, glad you made it. And how can we serve you today?
Oh, out of my Michael and Jeannie book of questions, we will start with, did I hear right, still point training in the last few days? Is that something that you are going to do, or did I just totally not hear that correctly?
Well, we do have a still point breathing club that meets once a month, but there are no still point trainings or workshops set up that have been done that are set to go at this point.
Okay.
We are considering. We're considering doing an intensive here locally in Virginia. There's a facility that we've used previously, quite a nice facility, and we've been talking about maybe doing something there, but we don't have anything scheduled at this point. And if we did still point training, it would be in the context of the Why Is This Happening to Me Again intensive, or one of the other intensives. That's always a part of every intensive that we do, but we don't have a specific still point breathing training that we do.
Got it.
He is doing the quantum still point.
Yeah, we have had a couple of conversations with that process we did with you. You were the first one that did it. Thank you for the inspiration.
Yes. What a blessing that was to be with you all and experience that, and something I have on my list to do again, to continue that wonderful, wonderful experience, and glad to be a part of that.
Well, it's interesting. I just did a 3-day with a gentleman from South Carolina, and it's opened a whole new arena of understanding and a whole new arena of questioning. I was telling Jeannie yesterday morning, it's like I'm getting downloads on the underlying dynamic of what's happening there, and they're downloads that I still don't understand. It's like, I need more brain cells for this. So, what are you telling me? What? So it's interesting to the opening that's brought. It's kind of exciting.
Yes, the whole concept of it and the learning, just since I was with you all the first week of March, and what I've learned working with a few people here in Texas, and it's just amazing how this antenna, as you explained it, I remember when I first heard that from you probably a year and a half ago, I'm thinking, what in the world, how could this be? I'm certainly building the...
Well, if you don't have a plug to plug something in, how else do you get an energy into a system except through the antenna structure?
Yeah.
If I've got my radio, I powered the radio by plugging it into a wall, but there are no voices in the radio until I have an antenna that brings in the frequency of those different stations. My TV, the same thing. My offering is, it's the same with us as human beings. Yes, we energize the system with food and breath, but the underlying attunement, when we're told in the ancient scriptures, in him, i.e. the Creator, we live, move, and have our being, what I hear is the brain cells I have for that is that we are moving through this intelligent energy field that many people have given many different names, and it's our attunement or alignment with that feeds us the information that's beyond what physiology can comprehend. And if the core of the antenna system has been damaged, just like somebody going up on the roof of my house and bending all the arms on the antenna and turning the antenna backward, that picture and sound's not going to be very good.
Could be a problem.
Yes.
Would you say...
And so recognizing that we have a live antenna that is a constantly self-adjusting, moving through a range of a range of shapes that give us access to different information. It's just, how the system works. And if we've been physically or emotionally traumatized, or there are generational traumas that are passed on, then there's damage done to that core antenna system. And, if we go back, I think I talked about this yesterday, but if we listen to what the scriptures called the Lord's Prayer, it isn't a prayer at all. It's a set of instructions for how to align ourselves, how to orient ourselves, tap into, and function out of the energy of that literal presence of love in which we live, move, and have our being.
Beautiful.
That's how the information gets in.
That's beautiful. Can we say, Michael, that the head, with all its pieces, the bone structure, how it does move, and is that really the main a place of the antenna, so to say? Would you agree with that, or?
My take would be it's the whole bony structure of the body is the antenna. The most complex part of it is in the head, and it's interesting if you look in anatomy and physiology and the development of the fetus, there's a point where the base of the skull sits right in the
pelvis,
sacrum.
And sacrum. Thank you.
To me, what that says is that they are attuned, resonating parts of the system. And when we grow, as they grow apart, there's still what happens in one impacts the other. And again, as with an antenna, the shape of the antenna determines the frequencies it receives, and if it's been misaligned, injured, damaged, or emotionally traumatized, until it gets back to its full and proper structure and range of motion, there's going to be trouble in paradise.
It is so remarkable what happens after those two cells come together in the womb, and how even not only the jaw and the sacrum, I believe you said, I just refer to as the kind of pelvis in general, but I'm challenged with a jaw that's out on both axes, as we have discussed, and also the pelvis a challenge. And finding out now in the last year how that's connected. It is absolutely remarkable. And then learning about how the teeth, when they're formed in the womb, are actually, there's some of them, I don't remember exactly which ones, I believe it's more the front teeth on upper and lower, are actually formed from the brain material, is my understanding. Just absolutely remarkable, our structure.
And it's further theorized by some that the teeth are also light sensitive and deliver light into the body.
Wonderfully and fearfully made, the book says.
That's it. Yeah, I'd take the fear out of there and make it awesomely. It's interesting that a text.
I like that.
Yeah, it's interesting that a text that hundreds of times tells us fear not. People have injected that word in their translations as though it's a natural part of living, rather than an abhorrent condition of the mind that needs to be cast out of us.
Yes, I'm guessing we're down to just a few moments.
We've got 3 or 4.
How do you see, like we have discussed even offline, the jaw, the vision, the skull in general? How do you see cataracts in floaters in vision, and how does this fit into the dysfunctional antenna, so to say, and just any thoughts you might have around those two things?
I think that taking care of our eyes is a key thing that many are not taught to do. And a lot of people, as young people, kids going to the beach and such, and they never think about protecting their eyes from an overexposure to sunlight, especially direct bright sunlight. And over time, my best understanding is that the cataract is the body setting up a defense against that assault. And so, taking care of the eyes, protecting the eyes, I think is a really key part in the whole process.
And that's the cataract you mentioned?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, it's the body's defense against being assaulted by too much of whatever the frequency ranges are from the sun that we really don't want to get into the eye in excess.
Lots to learn. Lots. Well, we're getting into a season of even more intense rain here in Texas. So, looking forward here to being able to be on the call a little bit more and knock out some questions out of my Michael and Jeannie
Fabulous.
book.
Appreciate your questioning mind. All right, lots of love and blessings, and everybody, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Have the best year yet of your eternal life.